Hey everybody, Tony D with another hot take. This one sort of harkens back to my video about my political theory regarding how the Republicans sort of become the man's party and the Democrats are becoming the female party. And now I'm not saying that just because I'm a misogynist and the Democrats are having a tough time. I'm saying that because I see the same sort of patterns of behavior with, say, the educational system, which has, and like publishing, which has been taken over by women, that I do in the Democratic Party. Women are held to a different standard by women. And men. Men are held to a different standard too. And there's this sort of wink and a nod, this unwritten rule that, well, we all know men for hundreds and hundreds of years kept women down, and now women can finally do things. That's not really true. The reality is women for thousands and thousands of years had a traditional role in society. Now, men had more power, but men were kind of designed for that in some aspects. I mean, in terms of their own physical prowess and their role as the protector in the sort of traditional relationships that had endured for thousands and thousands of years, right? So it was only natural that men would lead because men were also protecting. Men were also the stronger ones. It was all... Women would protect the kids. Women were like the last defense. They were like, well, if the men get overwhelmed, you know, the women would either fight to save the kids or they would flee. And there's nothing wrong with sort of acknowledging that that was usually the case. And yes, there were exceptions throughout history, but so what? The vast majority of it was as I described, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Now, we live in a more modern society where we'd like to have women and men be more equal, but they'll never really be equal. There'll always be some amount of differences simply because the genders are different. And there's nothing wrong with that either if we acknowledge it. I think the problem on the left side of politics and from, let's call it, the culture of women is there's a ardent refusal to acknowledge those differences. They just want to say, no, we're the same, and in fact, we're even better if given the chance. That doesn't comport with reality, and it all came back to me when I saw one of my favorite articles of all time. It's from 2009, and it's this true story about this woman who, she was a TV executive, an American who went back and forth to London, and she decided, hey, you know, television's pretty sexist, and but I'm doing well. I'm going to start an all-female company because you know, I have lots of money and backers or whatever, and we're going to do it. You know, women are going to do it for themselves. And then this article was years later about how it all fell apart. And the reason it fell apart was, I think, because women are not used to power. They haven't gone through the many, many generations that men have with this particular kind of direct power, let's say. And they haven't been able to use it effectively. They're still struggling with the tools that they just got. You know, Jordan Peterson points out that women, the biggest revolution for women was the invention of the pill, because for the first time, women could control their contraception, essentially. You know, that it was all in their hands with the use of that pill. And to some degree, he's right. And that's where you get women's liberation, right? And unfortunately, I think in the beginning, what we had were traditional women who were exploring these new potential things. But now what we have are the progeny of these women's livers, and they didn't have the traditional upbringing, so they're just acting like men who are completely unglued, right? So what are women doing? They're staying single, they're partying, they're having sex with as many people as they can, and this is a real issue because it's caused a lot of disturbances. It's hurting people. You know, I'm reminded of, too, the article about the woman who created Sex in the City, who, you know, led this fabulous single lifestyle for many years. And, you know, she had money and fame and, you know, pretty much everything she ever wanted. But now she kind of regrets not starting a family. So there is a huge downside. And I think part of it is not that women... Here's the thing with the Democratic Party, and particularly with Katie Hill, who I talked about yesterday. Like, Katie Hill should have been vetted. Before they gave Katie Hill the keys to the kingdom, Nancy Pelosi should have made sure that she was a capable and sensible person. See, if you're a guy, you know there are guys out there who act like maniacs. And you don't want to hire one of those maniacs if you're in a business, because he'll do cocaine and hookers, and he'll show up to work all bleary-eyed, and maybe he'll be crying because he got some woman pregnant. And I mean, it's just crazy, right? You got to vet people. You got to vet people, or you pay for it. I think women have this concept that, or many of them do, not all, because nothing's 100%, but the concept is, well, she's a woman, I have to help her. That's not necessarily true. Katie should have earned her wings before you started helping her, before you started like propping her up. Because if you had dug a little deeper, you might have said, you're really not the material that we're looking for, or you got to improve we can't tolerate your crazy past and your lifestyle. You gotta undo some of that. You gotta look like more of an upstanding citizen before you can be a politician. You can't, you know, have sex with one of your staffers. It should have been them coming out ahead of the curve saying, no, we will not accept you into our ranks as long as you're, you know, doing this behavior. But that's the element I don't see coming from a lot of feminists and women. They are quick to condemn men for their alleged crimes, or sometimes real crimes, but amongst their own gender, no, that's okay. No, the men do it, therefore we should do it too. And there's plenty of things that men do that women either shouldn't do or no one should do. So I think that's where the Democratic Party is, why they're having such a problem. They're bringing on anybody who fits the criteria. And there's other criteria other than just being a woman. There's the criteria of race and inclusiveness. And that's a problem too if you're not vetted. Like, if you just bring on a politician and bring him up because, well, we need a gay candidate, let's say, that's not reason enough to support a candidate. He has to be a capable politician, policymaker. If he's not the right person for the job. And you don't bring him up just because he happens to fit tick off some of your boxes. So what I see going forward for the Democratic Party is, if they continue just to tick off boxes, they're going to end up with more and more people who are just grossly underqualified to do anything. You know, Ocasio-Cortez is not unqualified because she was a bartender or because she's a woman. I think she's unqualified because she's really, really stupid. She says and does stupid things and doesn't really understand how economics and jobs and certain things work, in my opinion. So, you know, she is another example of someone who the Democrats need to vet before they just instantly say, well, she's a woman, therefore we got to support her. Oh, wait, she's Latina? Well, that's a marginalized group. Let's support her. Like, that's not a qualification that should mean anything in terms of being a policymaker. That is the same thing as saying, you know, what's the race and gender of a person who works for you? That shouldn't make a difference. It should be merit-based. And if it's not merit-based, you will get people who will essentially grift their gender or race just to gain a little power. Even if they may be genuine people who think they can do the job, right? But they're arrogant enough to believe that they don't really need to know that much, that they could just kind of do it. And lots of people are like that. So what are we seeing from the Democratic Party? We're seeing failure after failure after failure because, you know, I remember the Democrats in the 80s. They weren't failures. Now, I would say some of that, what their failure was a lot of times, was they failed to communicate properly. They would say and do things that made them look weak. And but again, that goes back to their drive to be inclusive and nice to everybody and nurturing. You can't, you know, you can't be that inclusive and nice. You're still the governor or the president or whomever. You can't, you know, say stupid things about how you're going to be nice to prisoners or that. You have to stand by a principle. You know, you could have a strong leader who says, we have to close Guantanamo Bay. It's a stain upon the United States, and it's highly illegal. Like, you could take that stance and make it work and look strong in doing it. You can't if you're sort of wishy-washy and dodging the issue. And that's what a lot of politicians do on both sides. But inherently, because the Democrats are chasing this, I don't know what you'd call it. I guess you'd call it like a utopian dream of a rainbow society. I think they're putting people in positions of power who just fall short of it. They're not really good. I mean, Ilhan Omar. Imagine, if you would, and I said this yesterday about Katie Hill, you know, a Republican who cheated on his wife and then went out and married his new mistress. Like, that wouldn't be acceptable behavior for a public servant in a public arena, okay? I mean, look, people blasted Newt Gingrich for his behavior. No, he still got elected, and yes, Republicans still supported him, but he got blasted for it at least. At least people like blasted him for it. No one's blasting Ilhan Omar. No one's saying, you know, you should put out a statement and at least, you know, say something about how this all shook out. But instead, people are just ignoring it because, well, she's on our side. We don't want to hurt her. We're too desperate to lose anybody at this point. So, you know, even with the media completely on their side, the Democrats won't do that. And understand that 90% of the media would have the most charitable interpretation of her mea culpa moment. And it would do a lot to sort of help her reputation. But, you know, I don't think she's that capable of a politician. I don't think she really cares. I think she's more concerned with grandstanding before she's kicked out of office than anything else, and writing a book and maybe getting a TV show deal or something down the road. I don't think her pathway lies in politics. And there's one more thing that I think, you know, and again, you're going to say, you sexist MFer. But, you know, there are a lot of women, and it's not all women, but there are a lot of women, they just love attention. They really do. And I don't know if that's a biological thing. I mean, there are some men who love attention, but not like women. Women love attention. And I think part of that hurts the Democratic Party too, because you have so many women in the party who just draw attention to themselves, and don't really have much else to offer other than that. They just sort of expect, oh, I've gotten your attention. And I think Nancy Pelosi's like that too. I think that's why she's gone on TV to show $13 ice cream, and it's kind of blown up in her face. Because, oh, I'm going on TV? Well, how nice. I'll look so wonderful. And I can show off my kitchen. Like, that's such a girly thing to do. You know, I don't think men are so image obsessed in that way. And if they were, it's more of a business sort of thing. They're not thinking of it in terms, do I look good? They're thinking it more in terms, well, will this be good for my career kind of thing, sort of a bigger picture. I mean, I think Nancy's thinking that too, but at the same time, I don't know what she could, you know, think about in terms of showing off expensive ice cream, you know, in her mansion kitchen. Would do for anybody. I mean, you know, maybe it's just that she's been rich for so long, it just didn't occur to her. But, you know, I think the Democratic Party, part of their problem is the growing pains of women for the first time. Not the first time, but this is the early time for female politician and female power. And they're kind of making all these kind of basic mistakes that men have kind of already, you know, they already know it's a big mistake to sleep with your coworker. I mean, that's a big mistake to sleep with one of your staffers. Holy cow. Now, some guys still do it. It's much rarer though. It's not like it was like in the 70s. You could get away with stuff in that era. You can't get away with that kind of thing anymore. Most of those guys have all either died or retired or gotten thrown out of office. So, you know, because women have more power and because they can say, well, I am a woman and you're picking on me, and that was part of Katie Hill's defense. They have too much power in that regard until they sort of bring that to bear and police other women in their group. Other women in Congress shouldn't just be blindly bringing the women in their party up. They should be saying, hey, listen, there's a certain way to act. There's a certain policy to head. There's a certain path to follow here, and you got to follow it. And you got to live up to some standards. I don't see the standards coming from a lot of the culture of women. What I see is we got to bring women up, period. And that's it. So, ladies, I think you have some standards to outline. And in those standards, hopefully you will set some limits for the Democratic Party so they can finally remember or discover what they're actually about and maybe have a message. Because we do need rival political parties in this country to temper those that are in power. And if you guys completely screw the pooch in November, and it looks very much that way, we're looking at a Republican agenda for quite a while. Way beyond just the next 4 years. You're looking at Trump, Pence, Trump. And you guys could be in the weeds for quite a while. Rebuild your party. Think about it.